The smoke was thick and low, rolling across the ground like something alive. It got into the eyes and the throat, and made the world smaller than it already was. The ridge that the human soldiers were supposed to hold had taken 3 direct hits in the last hour, and what was left of it looked less like a defensive position and more like the memory of one. Corporal Nathan Cole was running when he should have been crawling. He knew that. His sergeant had told him the same thing a dozen times during training. Keep your body low, keep your head down, do not give the enemy a silhouette to shoot at. Good advice. He had followed it for most of the morning. But the morning had been a long time ago, and the part of his brain that remembered good advice had gone quiet somewhere around hour 10 of the fighting. He slid behind a broken wall and pressed his back against the stone. His breathing was ragged. His left hand was bleeding from a cut he did not remember getting. He had started the day with a squad of 9 soldiers. He now had 3. And one of them, Private Lucy Harn, was 20 meters behind him, calling his name in a low, urgent hiss that he was choosing not to hear. The sky above the ridge flashed orange. Another orbital strike, somewhere to the east. The ground shook under his boots. Dust came down from the broken wall in thin streams and settled on his shoulders like gray snow. Nathan closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then he opened them and looked around the edge of the wall. The forward observation post had been a Velhari structure. He could tell by the shape of it, the tall narrow lines and the pale stone that the Velhari preferred, which was beautiful and completely useless against heavy fire. Most of it was on the ground now. One wall still stood. The rest was a pile of rubble that spread across the slope in a rough fan of broken stone and bent metal. He was about to look away when he saw the hand. It was reaching up from between 2 large slabs of fallen stone, fingers spread, pale violet against the gray rubble. Just barely. Just a slow, weakening curl of the fingers, but moving. Nathan was down the slope before he made any decision about it. His body just went. Later he would think about that, about how there had been no moment of weighing the risk, no internal debate, just the sight of that hand, and then his boots on the broken ground, moving toward it. Lucy's voice behind him went from a hiss to something sharper. He did not stop. The Velhari woman was buried from the waist down. The 2 slabs that had come down on her were each the size of a door, thick pale stone with broken edges. One had caught her across both legs. The other had fallen at an angle and was resting partly on the first, which was the only reason she was not dead. That angle had kept the full weight off her. She was looking at him when he reached her. He had not expected that. He had expected someone unconscious, or close to it. But her eyes were open, and they were gold, sharp and bright, and they were fixed on his face with an expression he could not name. Not fear, not relief, something more complicated than either. She spoke. Her voice was low and rough, and the words were Velhari, which he did not speak. He had learned about 30 words of Velhari in the 6 months since the joint operation began, and most of them were tactical terms that were no use right now. "I am going to get you out," Nathan said. He said it slowly and clearly, the way a person talks to someone who may not understand the words, but might understand the tone. "Just stay still. Do not move." She said something else. He could hear the effort it cost her. He got his hands under the edge of the first slab and pulled. It did not move. He repositioned, found a better grip, bent his knees, and pulled again. This time it shifted, grinding against the stone beneath it, and the woman made a sound that she stopped immediately, cutting it off like she was ashamed of it. "Almost," Nathan said, which was not entirely true. She looked at the situation for exactly 1 second, then got her hands on the slab next to his. They pulled together. The stone moved, scraped, tilted, and fell to the side with a crash that sent dust up in a white cloud around both of them. Nathan was already moving to the second slab. This one was at the angle, resting on the first. Now that the first was gone, the second was unstable, and it shifted when he touched it, which meant he had to be careful, which meant it took longer, which meant the woman on the ground was watching him work with those gold eyes, and trying very hard not to let him see how much pain she was in. He got the slab moved. He got down on one knee beside her. Her legs were bruised badly, the violet of her skin gone dark in broad, ugly patches. Her left leg was bent at an angle it should not have been bent at. Broken, probably, maybe more than one bone. There was blood at her temple where something had cut her, and her silver neck markings, which he had noticed on Valhari soldiers before, without ever getting close enough to really look at, were shifting slowly in the light. "Can you hear me?" he asked. "I can hear you," she said, in careful, accented human standard that surprised him completely. "Good," he said. "That is good. I am Nathan Cole." She looked at him, a long look, like she was making a decision. "Sail," she said. "Sail," he nodded. "Okay, Sail. I am going to move you now. It is going to hurt. I am sorry about that." "Do not apologize," she said. "Just move me." He got his arm under her shoulders and lifted. She was taller than him and built with the lean density of someone who had trained for combat her whole life, and the dead weight of her injured legs made it harder. But he got her up. She put her right arm across his shoulders and took what weight she could on her good leg. The left leg hung, and she looked at the middle distance and said nothing, and he could feel, through the arm across his shoulders, exactly how much effort that nothing was costing her. Lucy was already scanning the high ground, her rifle up. "We need to move," she said quietly. "I know," Nathan said. "The sector is not clear." "I know that too." He looked at Sail. She was looking back at him, and there was something in her expression now that had not been there before. Not warmth, not yet, but something opening. Some small door in a wall that had been closed a long time. "You did not know who I was," she said very quietly. Not a question. "No," he said. "You came anyway." "Yes." She said nothing else. Nathan tightened his grip, and they began to move up the slope together, slow and careful, while the sky above kept burning and the smoke rolled thick and low across the broken ground. Behind them, the rubble of the observation post settled in the quiet, and the gray dust came down and covered everything, and the hand that had been reaching was still. But the woman it belonged to was not. The medical tent was the loudest quiet place Nathan had ever been in. It was loud because there were too many people in it. Cots lined both walls, and the space between them was filled with medics, moving fast and speaking low, and stepping over the legs of soldiers who were sitting on the floor because there was no other place to sit. The sounds in the tent were not screaming sounds. They were the sounds that come after screaming. The low, steady hum of pain being managed, of people breathing carefully, of equipment doing the work that bodies could not do on their own. It was quiet because no one wasted words. Every person in that tent was either working or hurting, and neither state left much room for conversation. Nathan had brought Sail through the entrance, and a medic had come over immediately, taken one look at her leg, spoken quietly to a colleague, and moved on. Someone brought a folded blanket and put it on the floor against one of the support posts. Nathan helped Sail down onto it. Her face stayed controlled the whole time. Her jaw was tight. Her gold eyes were focused on something in the middle distance that was probably not anything in the tent at all. He sat down beside her, because leaving felt wrong. For a while neither of them spoke. Lucy had gone to check on the rest of the squad. Nathan sat with his back against the post and looked at the tent ceiling and listened to the sounds around them. Outside the guns had gone quiet. He did not know what that meant. Quiet could mean many things in a war, and most of them were not good. "Your medics are busy," Sail said. "Yes. There are Valhari medical units on the eastern side of the camp." "I know. I pointed that direction twice. I saw you." "You did not move," Nathan said. She was quiet for a moment. Her silver neck markings shifted, that slow, light-catching movement he had noticed before. He was starting to understand that it happened when she was thinking hard. "If I go back to my unit now," she said, "I go back as someone who was pulled from the field, someone who could not free herself." She said it evenly, the way a person states a rule they did not make, and do not love, but live under regardless. Among the Velhari, that carries a cost. What kind of cost? Not formal punishment, nothing written down, but the way people look at you changes. She paused. The way you look at yourself changes. Nathan thought about that. Because you needed help. Because I needed to be saved, she said. There is a difference in Velhari understanding. Needing help is acceptable in controlled circumstances. Needing to be saved means you lost complete control of your situation. It means you were, for a moment, helpless. She said the last word like it tasted bad. Helplessness is not something my people forgive easily, even in themselves. Nathan looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, her profile sharp and clean against the low light of the tent. "Where I come from," he said, "getting pulled out of rubble by somebody is usually just called luck. And luck is not a shame. Luck is random. Helplessness is a failure of preparation." "Sometimes walls fall on people," Nathan said. "That is not a failure of preparation. That is just walls falling." Sale turned her head and looked at him. He got the sense she had heard that kind of logic before and not found it convincing. He also got the sense, looking at her, that she was not entirely unconvinced. "Your people pull each other out of things often?" she asked. "Every chance we get. And no one thinks less of the person who was pulled." "The person doing the pulling usually gets a handshake," Nathan said, "or a bad joke, depending on the squad." Something very small moved at the corner of her mouth, but it was in the neighborhood. "What do you get for pulling an alien out of rubble?" she asked. "Still figuring that out," he said. She looked away again. The medic who had assessed her leg earlier came back, knelt, checked the break, wrapped it with quick, practiced hands, and left without saying much. Sale watched the process with the detached attention of someone who had been worked on by medics before, and understood that the politeness was in staying still and not making their job harder. When the medic left, she said, "You spoke to me like I was a person." Nathan waited. "On the slope," she said, "when you first found me, you did not know if I could understand you. You did not know who I was or what rank or what value. You just spoke to me like a person worth speaking to." She stopped. "I have been in this joint operation for 4 months. Very few of your soldiers have done that." "That seems like a problem," Nathan said. "It is the nature of alliances. Alliances are political before they are personal. Maybe they work better when they are personal first." She looked at him again, that same searching look she had given him on the slope, like he was a text in a language she mostly spoke but occasionally surprised her. "You are not like most soldiers I have met," she said. "I get that a lot. I do not think it is a complaint from the people who say it." "No," he agreed, "usually not." Outside something rumbled. Not a gun this time. Something structural, something shifting and settling. The tent canvas moved. The lamp overhead swayed once, and was still. A few people looked up, and then looked back down. In a war, you learned quickly which sounds needed your attention, and which ones were just the world, reminding you it was still happening. Nathan watched Sale's face during the rumble. She had not flinched. Her eyes had tracked to the entrance for a moment, and then returned. Threat assessment, fast and automatic, and then dismissed. Whatever had broken in her today on that slope, it was not her nerve. "How bad is the leg?" he asked. 2 breaks, clean ones. The medic said 6 weeks if I rested properly." She said rested properly, with the tone of someone who had no intention of doing that. "You are going to rest it properly," Nathan said. She looked at him with something that was definitely closer to amusement this time. "Are you giving orders to a Velhari soldier, Corporal?" "I am making a suggestion," he said, strongly. "Noted," she said, and then, after a pause, "Strongly noted." They sat together while the tent moved around them. Medics passed. Soldiers slept badly on narrow cots. The lamp swayed once more in a draft from the entrance. And outside, slowly, the quiet kept holding, which was the most fragile and valuable thing a battlefield ever offered. Nathan did not leave. Sale did not ask him to, and in the space between those two facts, something small and unnameable began to exist. The way small things always begin, quietly and without announcing itself. The 4 Velhari soldiers came through the tent entrance before sunrise, when the camp was at its gray and half-asleep hour, and most of the people inside the medical tent were either deeply unconscious or staring at the ceiling, thinking about home. Nathan had been doing the second thing. He had not slept. He was not sure he remembered how to sleep while sitting on a floor with a wall at his back, though he had done it before and would probably do it again. He had been sitting quietly, watching the entrance, listening to the camp sounds beyond the canvas, when the 4 soldiers came in. He did not recognize their rank markings. He knew enough about the Velhari to know that rank was indicated by the pattern and number of silver lines along the collar, but the finer distinctions were above his level of study. What he did recognize was the way they moved, the particular careful walk of soldiers who are escorting something important, each of them positioned just far enough apart to respond to a threat from any direction. They were followed by a tall Velhari woman in formal field dress. She moved differently from the 4 escorts. She did not scan the room. She walked through it like she already knew everything worth knowing about it, her eyes fixed on one point, and that point was Sale. Sale had been awake. Of course she had. Nathan suspected she had been awake longer than he had, and sleeping less, and showing less of it. She had been sitting straight against the support post, with her injured leg extended, and her hands resting on her knees, and her face giving away nothing. But when the tall woman walked through the entrance, something in Sale's posture changed. It was not fear. It was closer to bracing. The tall woman stopped in front of Sale. She looked her over. The wrapped leg, the dried blood at her temple, the dust still in her silver markings, with the expression of someone completing an inspection. Then she went down on one knee. The 4 escorts did the same. Nathan stared. The entire tent went still. The medic who had been restocking a supply cabinet stopped moving. The soldier on the nearest cot opened his eyes. Lucy, 3 cots back, sat up slowly with the particular alertness of someone who had learned to wake fast and assess before speaking. The tall woman spoke in Velhari for a long time. Her voice was even and formal and completely controlled. She was not apologizing. She was reporting. Nathan could hear the difference in the rhythm of it, in the way each sentence landed like something being placed rather than offered. Sale listened. She said 4 words in reply. The tall woman rose. She looked at Sale for a moment, and then she looked at Nathan. It was a brief look, direct and measuring, neither warm nor hostile. It was the look of a person filing away information. Then she turned and walked out, and the 4 escorts turned and followed, and the tent exhaled. "What," Lucy said carefully from 3 cots back, "was that?" "She was reporting to me," Sale said, to Nathan as if Lucy had not spoken. Not rudely, just directly. Giving me a status update on the battle situation, and confirming that my survival had been logged. Nathan looked at her. Sale looked back at him with the expression of someone who is about to say a thing they have said before and find tiring. "I am the 3rd daughter of the Velhari sovereign house," she said. "I did not tell you because at the time there was a wall on my legs and titles seemed beside the point." The tent was still very quiet. Nathan was aware of people listening and choosing not to look like they were listening, which was a skill soldiers developed early. "The tall woman," he said, "the one who went to her knee." "Hi, Captain Rel. She commands the Velhari ground forces in this sector. She reports to my father. When I am in the field, she reports to me as well." "And she came here," Nathan said, "before sunrise, to kneel in a human medical tent." She came to confirm I was alive. Among my people, that comes before everything else when a member of the sovereign house has been in combat. She would have done it in a river, if that was where I was. Nathan thought about everything she had said the night before, about shame and helplessness and the way her people looked at soldiers who had been pulled from danger. Last night, he said, you said your people would not look at you the same way. I said the culture was more complicated than I made it sound, Sale said. I was in pain. I was thinking about one part of a larger thing. And the larger thing? The larger thing is that I am alive. And among the Velhari, to survive is more important than to survive without difficulty. The shame is in dying, not in being helped. What I said last night was true, but it was not the whole truth. It was the part of the truth that felt heaviest at that moment. She said it plainly, without apology, but also without the careful flatness she had used before. There was something more open in it. I was not thinking clearly. You were honest, Nathan said. They are not the same thing. No, he agreed, but honest is harder sometimes, so it still counts for something. She looked at him for a moment. You do not let things go easily, she said. Not usually. Is that a human trait or a Nathan Cole trait? Mostly the second one, he said. Lucy had gotten up and come closer. She stopped a respectful distance away and addressed Sale directly, which Nathan noted and appreciated. Your Highness, she said, trying out the title carefully. Is there anything you need? Sale looked at her. There was a pause in which Nathan could see her deciding something. Breakfast, she said, if there is any, and perhaps something to sit on other than a floor. Lucy almost smiled. I can do both of those things. She went to find them. The early light was beginning to come through the tent seams, thin pale lines that moved when the canvas shifted. In that light her violet skin was closer to blue, and her gold eyes were very bright, and the silver markings at her neck were still and clear. Your Rel, Nathan said. She looked at me before she left. Yes. What was that about? She was noting you, Sale said. You are the soldier who pulled me out. She wanted to see your face. A pause. She will remember it. Is that good or bad? For you, Sale considered, it is neither. It is simply true. You are now a person who exists in Rel's understanding of the world. Before yesterday you were not. She looked at him steadily. That is more than most humans in this operation can say. Nathan nodded slowly. Outside the camp was waking up, the sounds of it rising gradually, voices and engines, and the ordinary work of a military morning beginning. The sky through the tent entrance was going from gray to pale gold. A new day. After the kind of night that made new days feel strange and necessary and worth noticing, Nathan noticed it, and beside him, quietly, so did Sale. The joint command briefing was held in a long prefabricated building on the northern edge of camp. The kind of structure that looked temporary from the outside and felt permanent on the inside because of how much tension it had absorbed over the months. The walls were covered in maps and overlays and colored pins that tracked positions the way a doctor tracks symptoms, looking for patterns, looking for the thing that was going wrong before it went all the way wrong. Nathan had no formal reason to be there. He was a corporal. Briefings at this level were for officers, and the people officers brought with them, and corporals were not usually on that list. But Sale had said his name to the Velhari escort who came for her that morning, said it in a way that did not invite discussion, and the escort had looked at Nathan, and then decided not to have the conversation that would have been necessary to stop him coming. He stood against the back wall. He kept his expression neutral and his hands at his sides. He tried to look like he had been inside rooms like this many times before, which was not entirely a lie. He had been inside rooms like this, just usually to carry something in and put it down and leave. The table in the center of the room had two sides, human officers on the left, Velhari officers on the right. High Captain Rel sat near the head of the Velhari side. She had noted Nathan when he entered, the same brief measuring look she had given him in the medical tent, and then she had returned her attention to the maps on the wall. Sale sat between two Velhari officers, with her wrapped leg extended under the table, and her posture so precisely correct it looked carved. She did not look at Nathan, but he had learned in the past day that she always knew where he was. The briefing began. A human colonel named Gren walked through the tactical situation in flat, efficient language, the kind that had been stripped of everything except information. The enemy had consolidated in the northern pass. The pass was narrow and elevated, and the approaches were exposed. The estimates for casualties on a direct push were somewhere between bad and very bad, depending on what the models were built on and how much you trusted them. The Velhari colonel spoke next. He was a broad man with more silver in his neck markings than anyone else at the table, and he spoke in human standard, with the careful precision of someone who had learned the language as an adult and resented needing to use it, even slightly. He proposed a single-species assault. Faster decision cycles, he said, less friction in the command structure. The Velhari forces would take primary position. Colonel Gren countered that the human forces had more experience with the specific terrain type in that pass. He proposed the same structure, with humans at the front. There was a silence. Both colonels looked at the maps instead of each other. It was the kind of silence that happened when two people had decided on their positions before entering the room, and were now simply waiting to see who would move first. Sale spoke. She spoke in human standard, which Nathan had noticed was a choice, not a necessity. She could have spoken Velhari and used the translator units. She chose not to. She began with the data. She was precise and unhurried, and she laid out the numbers from the previous engagements, without emphasis, just fact following fact, the way a structure follows its foundation. The joint units had performed above projection in 7 of the last 9 engagements. The combined approach patterns had created flanking opportunities that single-species units had not generated in equivalent situations. Response times in crisis moments had been faster in the joint configuration, not slower, because 2 different kinds of trained perception in the same unit caught more than one kind alone. The Velhari colonel listened with his hands flat on the table. Colonel Gren listened with his arms crossed. Neither interrupted. Then Sale said, 2 days ago I was pinned under collapsed stonework on the western ridge. My unit had been pushed back. I was alone. I was close to the end of what I could survive. She paused, 1 beat. A human corporal came down a contested slope without orders, and without any knowledge of who I was. He did not know my rank. He did not know my name. He did not know my species, beyond the fact that I was an ally. He came because I was alive, and he wanted me to stay that way. The room was very quiet. That is not a small thing, she said. That is not a diplomatic policy or a tactical calculation. That is a person reaching for another person because it was the right thing to do. We can argue about command structure and approach angles, and we should, because those things matter. But the reason the joint configuration works is not structural. It is because when the structure fails, the people inside it do things like that. You cannot get that from a single species unit. You can only get it from people who have worked beside each other long enough to see each other as worth reaching for. She stopped. She did not look at Nathan. She did not need to. Everyone in the room who was curious about who she meant had already found him with their eyes. Colonel Gren uncrossed his arms. He looked at the Velhari colonel. The Velhari colonel looked at his hands for a moment and then looked at the map. A joint approach, the Velhari colonel said. It was not quite a question. A joint approach, Colonel Gren agreed. It was not quite an answer. It was the sound of 2 people arriving at the same place from different directions, and both pretending they had planned to meet there all along. The briefing moved on. Plans were drawn. Units were assigned. Nathan stood against the back wall and looked at the floor, and worked very hard on keeping his face quiet. Afterward, in the corridor outside, Sale moved beside him. She was using a single crutch that the human medics had found for her, and she moved on it with the focused efficiency of someone who refused to let the crutch slow her down more than the leg itself did. They walked together without speaking for a moment. "You did not have to say that," Nathan said. "I said what was accurate," Fail replied. "Still." She slowed slightly. The corridor was mostly empty, 2 soldiers passing at the far end, a door opening and closing somewhere ahead. "You asked me, on the slope, why I kept going back to what you said, about reaching." She looked at the middle distance. "I have been in this operation for 4 months. I have sat in 12 briefings in that room. I have made accurate arguments before." The colonels have nodded and returned to their positions. She paused. "Today they moved, not because of the numbers. The numbers have always been in that room. They moved because of one thing that was not a number." Nathan said nothing. "You," she said. "You were the thing that was not a number." He looked at her. She was already looking ahead again, her gold eyes steady, her crutch moving in its careful rhythm. "I just went down a slope," he said. "Yes," she said. "That is exactly what I mean." They walked on. The camp was loud around them, busy and purposeful and indifferent to the 2 of them moving through it, a human corporal and a Velhari princess, side by side in a corridor that smelled of metal and cold air, going nowhere in particular, and arriving, without quite meaning to, somewhere that mattered. 3 weeks passed, and the pass was taken, and the cost was lower than the models had predicted. That was not a small thing. In Nathan's experience, the cost was almost never lower than the models predicted. The models had a tendency to be optimistic in the wrong places, and catastrophic in the right ones, and you learn to hold both possibilities in your mind at the same time, and try not to let either one own you. But this time, the joint unit had moved well, and the timing had been right, and the things that go wrong in those situations had mostly gone wrong in ways that people were able to manage. He had come through it with a graze along his right forearm and a ringing in his left ear that the medics said would fade in a week. Lucy had come through with nothing at all, which was either luck or skill, and probably both. 4 people in the unit had not come through, and Nathan carried their names the way he carried all such names, in a place that did not get lighter over time, but that you learned to walk with. The pass was held. That was what it had cost. And every person in the joint operation who understood what holding that pass meant, understood that the cost was worth it, even the ones who hated that it was worth it. Sale found him in the evening. He was sitting on an empty crate at the edge of the equipment yard, cleaning his rifle in the way that soldiers clean rifles after operations. Not because the rifle necessarily needed it, but because the hands needed something to do while the mind worked through what the day had been. The light was going orange in the west. Somewhere behind the equipment line someone was talking in Velhari, a pair of voices going back and forth in the comfortable rhythm of people who have been through something together, and are now processing it in the only way that works, which is out loud with someone who was also there. He heard her crutch before he saw her. She had kept it longer than he expected, which told him the leg was healing slower than she was willing to admit. She came around the corner of the equipment line and stopped when she saw him. And then she came and sat down on a second crate across from him. She was in full Velhari field dress. The silver neck markings were sharp and clear, recently cleaned. Her gold eyes were steady in the fading light. "You are leaving," Nathan said. It was not a question. The dress told him. The time of day told him. "Tomorrow morning, my father has ended my field commission. He says I have accomplished what I came to accomplish." She paused. "He is not wrong, though he does not know everything I have accomplished." Nathan set the rifle across his knees. "What did you come to accomplish?" "Officially, I came to represent the sovereign house in the joint operation, and to assess whether the alliance was worth continuing to invest in." She looked at him steadily. "Unofficially, I came because I wanted to understand humans, not politically, actually. And, she said, I found you on a ridge." Nathan was quiet for a moment. The orange light was deepening. The voices from behind the equipment line had gone still. "What did you decide?" he asked. "About the alliance. That it should continue. That it is more than a political calculation. She tilted her head slightly. That the case for it is not in the strategy documents. The case for it is in what people do when the structure breaks down, and there is no rule telling them what to do next. They do what seems right, Nathan said. They do what seems right, she agreed. And your people's sense of what seems right is, she paused, looking for the word, different from ours. Not better or worse, different. You move toward the thing that is hurting, we move toward the thing that is threatening. Both are useful. Together they cover more of the ground. It felt true, the way things feel true when they are putting words to something you already knew without words. Sail reached into the front of her field jacket and brought out a small case. Dark material, Velhari manufacture, about the size of a matchbox. She held it out to him. He took it. He opened it. Inside was a piece of worked silver, about the length of his finger, narrow and flat, with markings along its surface that he could not read. It hung on a simple cord. The silver was not polished to shine. It had a softer quality, a depth to it, like the light was coming from inside the metal, rather than off the surface. "What is this?" he asked. "An honor token. Velhari," she said it simply. "We do not give them often. They are personal, not official. There is no ceremony. You give them to people who change something in the way you see the world." Nathan looked at the token. The markings along it were fine and even, made by a careful hand. "What does it say?" he asked. "It does not say anything exactly. The markings are my housemark, and then a single Velhari concept that translates roughly as, one who reached without being asked." She paused. "It is considered one of the higher things a person can do, in Velhari understanding. To reach, when it was not required, when there was no rule that said you had to." Nathan closed the case. He held it in both hands for a moment, and looked at it. "I am going to tell you something," he said, "and I mean it seriously. What you did in that briefing room mattered more than anything I did on that slope." "The slope was what made the briefing room possible," Sale said. "Maybe. But you are the one who stood up in front of two colonels and said what was true, even though it was not what either of them wanted to hear." He looked at her. "That takes something. Rank does not make that easier. Sometimes it makes it harder." Sale looked at him for a long moment. In the fading light her expression was open, in a way he had only seen it become gradually, over days, as layer after careful layer had come down. "I told you that my people believe the shame is in dying," she said. "That is true, but there is something we believe more than that." She paused. "The highest thing is to live in a way that makes you worth saving." Nathan was quiet. "You made me worth saving," she said. "Not because of who I was, because of how you came down that slope. You made every living thing on that battlefield worth saving, by doing it. That is not a small thing, Nathan Cole. That is the largest thing." He did not know what to say. He said nothing, which felt like the honest response. Sale stood. She settled the crutch under her arm, and straightened, and she was tall in the orange evening light, and the silver at her neck caught what was left of the sun. "When this is over," she said, "I would like to show you what my world looks like, if you want to see it." "I want to see it," Nathan said, without hesitating. Something in her face shifted. That small movement at the corner of her mouth that he had been learning to watch for, that was not quite a smile, but was everything a smile would say if it did not need to announce itself. "Stay alive, Corporal," she said. "You too," he said. "Your Highness." She walked away. He watched her go, the crutch moving in its quiet rhythm, until she turned the corner of the equipment line, and was gone. Nathan looked down at the case in his hands. He opened it again, and looked at the token. The silver had that same inner quality in the evening light, like something still and warm and permanent. He put it in his front pocket, against his chest, where he could feel it. Above him the sky had gone from orange to deep blue, and the first stars were coming out, and the pass to the north was held, and the world was still here. He picked up his rifle, and finished cleaning it, quietly, while the stars came out one by one, and the camp settled around him, and somewhere behind the equipment line, the two Velhari voices started up again, easy and low, talking about the day.